A sealed kingdom lies hidden beneath a Chinese hillside. This is the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, and it guards one of history's most astonishing secrets. For more than 2,000 years, this unopened mausoleum has defied exploration, protected by ancient tales of rivers made from shimmering, toxic mercury. By the end of this story, you will understand the startling scientific evidence that suggests these legends are true, and what that reveals about the mind of an emperor who sought to rule beyond death. How did ancient builders possibly create flowing metal rivers, and why do modern archaeologists refuse to open the chamber? We will follow clues from fragile texts to contaminated soil, unraveling a puzzle where ambition, artistry, and ancient science collide. What does it mean when a myth leaves a measurable trace in the modern world? He was a man who believed his destiny was carved into the very bones of the earth. Qin Shi Huang ascended a fractured throne at the age of 13, inheriting not a peaceful kingdom but the violent, final chapter of a centuries-long struggle known as the Warring States period. This was a world of 7 rival kingdoms, each with its own laws, its own currency, its own written language. To cross a border was to step into a different reality, a system designed for division. The young king saw this chaos not as the natural order, but as a problem to be solved with absolute, unyielding force. Over the next 2.5 decades, he did what many thought impossible. He marshaled armies of staggering size and discipline, conquering each rival state one by one. By the year 221 before the Common Era, the map was redrawn. For the first time, the land we now call China was unified under a single ruler, a single banner. He declared himself not just a king, but something new. Qin Shi Huang died, the first sovereign emperor. This was more than a military victory. It was an act of cosmic reorganization. His ambition was to forge a single, eternal system from the fragments he had welded together. Imagine the practical chaos of daily life before him. A merchant traveling between former states would need a pouch full of different coins and might be unable to read a simple road sign. The emperor mandated one universal currency, one standard set of weights and measures. Most profoundly, he ordered a unification of the written script. While regional spoken dialects could remain, the written word would now be the same for every scholar, every administrator across the entire empire. This created a shared channel of thought and command that bound the land together long after his passing. He even ordered the axles of all carts to be a standard length, so their wheels would fit into the same ruts on the vast network of roads he built. Every detail of life was to fit into a grand, orderly design. This mindset of supreme control extended to the very boundaries of his realm. He connected and massively expanded earlier fortifications into the first continuous Great Wall, a literal and symbolic barrier against the chaotic outside world. And it reached toward the heavens themselves. The emperor became consumed with a quest for physical immortality, dispatching expeditions to faraway islands in search of mythical elixirs. He drank potions laced with mercury, believing it to be a source of eternal life, unaware he was slowly poisoning himself. This is the crucial intersection of his character, the point where his story flows directly into the tomb. When the promise of an unending earthly life began to fade, his immense will turned toward ensuring an equally powerful afterlife. If he could not live forever in this world, he would rule forever in the next. His mausoleum, therefore, could not be a simple hole in the ground. It had to be a permanent, fortified capital for his eternal reign, a mirror of his imperial palace, complete with everything he would need to govern forever. It had to be a universe in miniature under his complete command, safe from the decay and rebellion of the world above. The scale of this vision demanded a project of almost unimaginable labor, one that would begin early in his reign and continue without pause for nearly 4 decades. The man who standardized a civilization was now determined to standardize eternity itself. The sheer size of his vision is almost impossible to grasp from the surface. Today, the burial mound rises as a quiet, grass-covered hill, but beneath it lies an entire kingdom in suspended animation. According to the great historian Sima Qian, writing about a century after the emperor's passing, the tomb was designed as a perfect echo of his earthly capital, Xianyang. Think of it not as a burial chamber, but as the ultimate administrative complex. The records describe a vast subterranean palace, its ceiling decorated with pearls to represent the constellations, a permanent night sky under which the emperor would forever hold court. The floor was said to be fashioned into a model of his unified empire, complete with miniature palaces, towers, and flowing rivers. This was more than opulence, it was a functional blueprint. The tomb would have contained everything required for eternal governance, from bronze models of his officials ready to take orders, to stables for his chariots, to storehouses for grain and treasure. The psychological drive here is breathtaking. It speaks to a belief that death was not an end, but a relocation of the seat of power. His identity as the sovereign emperor was not a temporary title, but a permanent state of being that he intended to carry, fully staffed and operational, into the next world. This makes the site far more than a grave. It is a 3-dimensional snapshot of the Qin dynasty's entire worldview, its obsession with order, hierarchy, and perpetual control. Every detail was meant to ensure the bureaucracy of the afterlife would run as smoothly as the one he built on Earth. And at the very heart of this model empire, Sima Qian's account mentions a feature so extraordinary, so audacious, that for centuries it was dismissed as pure poetic fantasy, a detail meant to symbolize imperial grandeur rather than describe a physical reality. He wrote of vast, shimmering rivers and seas, not of water but of liquid mercury. Yet for centuries, that astonishing description of mercury rivers was considered just that, a legend. The tomb itself was a silent, overgrown hill, and the written histories were viewed with a mix of reverence and skepticism. Then, in the spring of 1974, a group of farmers digging a well about a mile east of the mound struck something hard and unyielding. They had uncovered not water but the edge of a vast underground vault, and within it the silent, staring face of a life-sized clay soldier. This accidental discovery would rip a hole in time, offering the first tangible proof of the tomb's unimaginable scale. What they had found was pit number 1 of what we now call the Terracotta Army. Subsequent excavations revealed not one, but several massive pits containing thousands of these figures, each one unique. There are infantrymen standing at solemn attention, archers frozen in the act of drawing a bow, charioteers holding reins for horses that are also sculpted from clay. Every face is different, with distinct hairstyles, expressions, and even the intricate details of their armor and footwear. This was not a production line of identical statues. This was a portrait in clay of an actual, complete military formation, a snapshot of the very army that had unified China. The psychological purpose is clear. These warriors were the emperor's eternal imperial guard, stationed in perfect order to protect his subterranean kingdom from any spiritual threat. Their discovery did more than amaze the world, it fundamentally validated the ancient texts. If Sima Qian's account was accurate about an army of thousands buried in the vicinity, then his other, more fantastical claims about the tomb's interior suddenly demanded to be taken seriously. The army also revealed the breathtaking organizational power of the Qin state. Creating this force required a massive, coordinated industry, workshops with teams of artisans, each specializing in heads, torsos, arms, or armor. A system of kilns capable of firing such large clay figures without having them crack. a logistics network to transport them and arrange them in precise military formation. This was a project that mirrored the efficiency of the real Qin military, but applied to art and eternity. The Terracotta army, as awe-inspiring as it is, serves as a profound and deliberate clue. It is the outermost layer of defense, stationed a distance from the central mound. It is the grand, accessible antechamber that hints at the sanctum. If this much care, this much resources, this much genius was poured into the Guardians, what then must wait with the guarded? The silent clay soldiers point their unwavering gaze toward the sealed hill, standing as permanent sentinels for secrets we have still not seen. Our most direct window into that sealed world comes from a single, fragile source. Nearly a century after the first emperor's passing, the Han Dynasty historian Sima compiled his monumental records of the Grand Historian. Within its pages lies a description of the tomb so vivid it has haunted imaginations for 2 millennia. He wrote that the emperor's artisans crafted a miniature universe underground, a perfect map of his realm. The great rivers of China, the Yellow River and the Yangtze, were somehow duplicated, and even the vast ocean was represented. But these were not waterways of stone or pigment. Sima states they were filled with, and I quote, flowing mercury. To complete this otherworldly scene, he added that the ceiling was inlaid with pearls to mimic the constellations, creating an eternal night sky over this metallic landscape. The account goes further into the realm of security, describing ingenious mechanical traps, crossbows set to trigger automatically should any intruder breach the inner sanctum. For generations, scholars read this and saw not a technical report, but a symbolic masterpiece of historical literature. It was a powerful metaphor for the emperor's wealth and his desire to control the very elements in the afterlife. The mercury represented something unattainable and wondrous, a liquid metal mirror of the celestial rivers above. The traps were a narrative device, emphasizing the tomb's sacred, forbidden nature. This interpretation was comfortable, logical. It placed the story safely in the category of ancient legend, where it could be admired without being believed. Yet the discovery of the Terracotta army shattered that comfortable distance. Sima had mentioned, almost in passing, that the emperor was buried with figures and officials. For centuries, that too was seen as symbolic, perhaps meaning small statuettes. Then farmers struck clay, and the world saw he meant an entire army of life-sized warriors, arranged in precise military formation. If the historian was meticulously, astonishingly correct about an army of thousands buried a mile away, what does that imply about his description of the tomb's heart? Suddenly, the Mercury rivers shifted from poetic metaphor to a startling, testable hypothesis. This creates the core tension of the mystery. Do we dismiss the most fantastical part of his account while accepting the rest, or does the verification of one incredible claim force us to seriously consider the other? Sima text is no longer just a story. It is a centuries-old clue, a challenge left by a historian who may have had access to records or even eyewitness accounts now lost to time. The question is no longer simply what the text says, but how literally we are meant to read it. The legend of the Mercury rivers was now faced with a modern scientific test. In the 1980s, equipped with technology Sima could never have dreamed of, a team of Chinese researchers began a systematic survey of the tomb mound. They were not digging, but listening to the earth with a suite of geophysical tools, measuring magnetic fields and taking core samples of the soil. What they found was not a symbol, but a startling chemical signature. The soil surrounding the central burial mound contained mercury levels up to 100 times higher than the natural background levels for the region. This was not a vague trace, but a pronounced and measurable anomaly. The ancient text had spoken of flowing mercury, and here, millennia later, was the persistent, toxic echo of that claim, seeping silently through the soil. A poetic metaphor does not leave a quantifiable environmental footprint, but an actual reservoir of liquid metal, slowly degrading over centuries, certainly would. This single finding transformed the entire investigation. The story was no longer just a historical curiosity. It was now an archaeological hypothesis with physical evidence. Even more intriguing was the pattern the mercury seemed to form. The elevated readings were not a single, uniform blob beneath the hill. Instead, they appeared in distinct concentrations and pathways. Some researchers mapping the data have suggested this distribution could resemble the flow patterns of a river system, with higher concentrations along specific channels. While it is impossible to confirm a perfect map of China below ground without opening the chamber, the very suggestion is breathtaking. It implies a deliberate, sophisticated design. The mercury may not have been simply pooled in a pit, but actively circulated through a constructed landscape, mimicking the great rivers that were the lifeblood of the emperor's realm. This shifts our understanding of the project from staggering opulence to staggering engineering. Creating such a system would have required an immense quantity of mercury, knowledge of hydraulics to manage a liquid metal that is 13 times denser than water, and a method to keep it flowing, perhaps through some gentle, continuous heat source. The environmental puzzle is profound, for this hidden, metallic hydrology has been interacting with its earthen container for over 2,000 years, creating a unique and hazardous time capsule. The scientific validation of the mercury legend does not simplify the mystery. It deepens it exponentially, raising urgent new questions about what exactly is preserved in that dark, sealed space and what condition it might be in. Mercury shimmered with a dual nature in the ancient world, both a physical substance and a vessel for profound hopes. To understand its presence in the tomb, we must step into the mindset of the time, where the lines between science, magic, and philosophy were beautifully blurred. In ancient China, this liquid metal was known as quicksilver, a name that captures its elusive, almost living quality. It was the central obsession of Taoist alchemical traditions, practitioners who sought not just to transform base metals into gold, but to achieve the ultimate transformation, the human body into an immortal vessel. They observed mercury's unique properties, its refusal to tarnish or decay, its silvery liquidity that seemed to hold the moon within it. This led to a powerful belief that mercury contained the very essence of vitality and permanence. It was considered a crucial ingredient in formulating elixirs of life, potions meant to grant the drinker eternal youth. We know from historical records that Qin Shi Huang himself consumed such mixtures, tragically unaware that the very substance he hoped would save him was slowly causing his decline. This gives his choice to flood his tomb with mercury a heartbreaking and profound irony. Within this alchemical framework, the rivers were far more than a stunning display of wealth. They represented a monumental ritual act. By surrounding his resting place with this magical material, the emperor may have believed he was creating a permanent source of transformative energy, a metaphysical battery that would preserve his form and power for all time. The flowing design suggested by soil samples is critical here. Stagnant mercury might simply be a pool, but circulating mercury mimics the rivers of the living world, the bloodstream of the earth itself. It implies a system meant to be perpetually active, a magical hydrology powering his underground kingdom. So the challenge shifts from a simple question of how they did it to a deeper wonder of why they believed it was necessary. The project merges a staggering engineering feat with a breathtaking act of faith. It was the ultimate application of the emperor's controlling will, an attempt to command not just the physical landscape of his tomb, but the very spiritual processes of life, death, and what lies beyond. The rivers of Mercury were, in this light, both a map of his empire and a diagram of his deepest desire, a final alchemical prayer made solid and silent under a hill. This brilliant liquid metal offered a defense as formidable as any clay soldier, while Mercury held deep symbolic power for the Emperor's quest for eternity. It possessed another, more immediate property that his architects would have keenly understood. In its liquid state, Mercury slowly releases an invisible, odorless vapor. This vapor is intensely toxic, capable of causing debilitating illness and, with prolonged exposure, a fatal outcome. The concept of vast rivers of mercury, therefore, transforms from a purely mystical feature into a potential masterpiece of ancient security design. Imagine an intruder having somehow bypassed the mechanical crossbows described by Sima Qian, finally breaking into the central chamber. They would not be met with a still, silent pool, but with an atmosphere saturated for centuries by the slow evaporation from a massive, flowing metallic system. The effect would be insidious and inescapable. There would be no dramatic trigger, no flying arrows, just a silent, creeping poison filling the air they breathe. This suggests a level of strategic thinking that is chilling in its sophistication. The tomb's protection was not merely a static barrier, it was an active, environmental hazard. The mercury may have served a dual purpose, both a sacred alchemical river for the Emperor's journey and a perpetual, self-renewing deterrent against the living. It created a zone that was spiritually consecrated for one individual and physiologically hostile to all others. This combination of mechanical and chemical warfare reveals a mindset that sought to extend the Emperor's absolute control beyond the reach of any human hand. The traps were not just about causing immediate harm, they were about making the entire inner sanctum fundamentally uninhabitable. It was the ultimate statement of exclusion, ensuring that his subterranean universe would remain untouched, a perfect preserve. This understanding reframes the entire engineering challenge. The builders were not only tasked with moving a miracle of liquid metal and shaping it into rivers, they had to contain its danger, likely for the workers themselves during construction, while ensuring its lasting potency as a guard. It speaks to a terrifyingly advanced grasp of material science and its consequences. The tomb thus becomes more than a memorial, it becomes a kind of engineered ecosystem, balanced in a state of lethal equilibrium. This raises a profound and practical question for modern researchers, one that goes beyond historical curiosity and touches on present-day safety. If the soil outside shows such high contamination, what does that imply about the atmosphere sealed inside for millennia? The legend of the Mercury rivers, verified by science, now presents a very real and physical barrier to discovery, a final, vaporous wall standing between our time and his. The practical reality of building those rivers is a puzzle that stretches our understanding of ancient engineering. Mercury is not like water, it is 13 times heavier, a substance that clings to itself in dense, silvery beads and exerts tremendous pressure on anything trying to hold it. Simply digging trenches in the earth would not work. The liquid metal would seep away into the soil, vanishing into the ground. So the first and most critical challenge was containment. How do you build a channel that can hold a flowing liquid that behaves more like molten lead than a gentle stream? Theories proposed by archaeologists and engineers point to sophisticated, sealed conduits. The Qian were master bronze casters, as evidenced by their intricate chariots and weapons. They could have fabricated long, interlocking sections of bronze piping, carefully soldered to be perfectly watertight, or rather mercury-tight. Another possibility is the use of ceramic channels, glazed and fired to a glass-like smoothness to prevent absorption, or even stone troughs meticulously carved and lined with many layers of resilient lacquer, a material the Qian used extensively to preserve and protect. This was not a simple basin. It was likely a permanent, sealed circulatory system installed within the architecture of the burial chamber itself, a hidden network of veins for the artificial landscape. But a contained river is just a canal, a static feature. The historical account and the soil patterns suggest movement, a flowing system. This introduces a second, even more complex layer to the enigma: circulation. To mimic the Great Yellow River or the Yangtze, the mercury needed to flow to have a current. This implies a motive force, an ancient pump. One compelling theory involves the principle of the siphon, using gravity and air pressure to pull liquid from one reservoir to another in a continuous loop. The builders could have constructed an elevated source, a hidden tank of mercury at one end of the chamber, and used bronze siphons to draw it through the channel network, letting it collect in a lower basin, only to be manually or mechanically lifted back to the start again. Some researchers speculate about simple water wheel or piston pumps, perhaps powered by a diverted underground stream or by teams of workers operating them from a separate, protected chamber during the final stages of sealing the tomb. The goal was to create an illusion of perpetual, living hydrology, a final testament to an empire that never slept. The logistical scale of this operation is almost beyond comprehension. The mercury itself, known as cinnabar in its ore form, had to be mined in enormous quantities from distant mountains, then transported with immense care. The refining process, heating the ore to release the pure liquid metal, was dangerous and toxic. Handling thousands of pounds of this substance, pouring it into the newly built channels, all without modern protective equipment, speaks to a project where human welfare was utterly secondary to imperial command. The workforce, vast and expendable in the eyes of the court, faced invisible hazards with every task, a silent cost woven into the glittering rivers they created. This dark reality underscores the absolute nature of the emperor's power, a will so commanding it could marshal not just armies, but the very elements and the lives of countless individuals to shape a private eternity. The engineering marvel is inseparable from its human toll, a creation born from equal parts genius and profound hardship. The most compelling mysteries are often the ones we choose not to solve. With the secrets of the first emperor's tomb seemingly within our technological reach, a profound and deliberate restraint defines modern archaeology. The question is not whether we can open the burial mound, but whether we should, and the global scientific consensus leans heavily toward patience. This hesitation is not born from fear, but from a hard-learned wisdom and a deep ethical responsibility. The primary reason is a fundamental shift in philosophy. Earlier generations of archaeologists often operated like treasure hunters, prioritizing discovery above all else. Today, the field understands that excavation is, by its nature, an act of destruction. The moment a sealed, 2,000-year-old environment is breached, it begins an irreversible change. Dust settles, humidity shifts, and delicate materials that have been in perfect equilibrium for millennia can vanish before our eyes. The guiding principle now is preservation in situ, leaving cultural heritage undisturbed whenever possible, treating the tomb not as a prize to be claimed, but as a legacy to be safeguarded for future generations who may have far better tools to understand it. Then there is the very tangible, toxic shadow cast by the mercury. The high levels detected in the surrounding soil are a stark warning. If that is the seepage outside the central chamber, the concentration within the sealed space could be catastrophic. Opening the tomb could release a concentrated plume of poisonous vapor, an immediate danger to any team on site, and a potential environmental hazard for the local area. It presents a paradox. The very security system designed by ancient engineers remains potent enough to thwart modern curiosity. Beyond the poison air, there is the fragility of the artifacts themselves. Based on other Qin dynasty finds, we can expect unimaginable treasures inside, silks as fine as a spider's web, lacquered wooden objects, delicate paintings, and perhaps the emperor himself, possibly surrounded by organic materials that have been preserved in a unique microclimate. Our current technology is simply not capable of instantly stabilizing such a wide array of materials upon their first contact with 21st century air. We risk watching priceless history turn to dust in moments, a loss far greater than any gain from rushing in. This has led to a fascinating new frontier in archaeology, the development of non-invasive reconnaissance. Scientists are not just waiting, they are actively working to see without touching. Imagine advanced ground-penetrating radar that can create three-dimensional maps of the chamber's layout, or muon tomography, a technique that uses cosmic rays to peer deep into solid rock, much like a medical scan for the Earth. Sensitive chemical sniffers could analyze the faintest gases escaping through microscopic fissures, telling us about the conditions inside. The goal is to build a complete digital model of the tomb, to understand its structure and contents as fully as possible before ever breaking a seal. This cautious, step-by-step approach honors both the historical significance of the site and the safety of the people dedicated to studying it. The unopened door stands as a testament to a new kind of respect, where our greatest act of discovery may be the wisdom to leave the mystery intact for now. That unopened door poses a question that echoes far beyond the hills of central China. We are left weighing two immense possibilities, each carrying its own profound weight. Is the tomb ultimately a place of eternal slumber, a sacred monument whose greatest power lies in its undisturbed mystery, or is it a historical time capsule, an archive whose contents are too vital to remain locked away forever? This is not merely an archaeological dilemma, it is a philosophical crossroads for how we value the past. On one side of the scale rests the potential for unimaginable knowledge. If the ancient descriptions hold true, the central chamber is not just a burial site, it is the preserved heart of the Qin dynasty. Within those sealed walls could lie answers to questions we have not yet even thought to ask. We might find complete libraries of bamboo slips, the official records and literary works that were lost when the emperor's above-ground palaces burned. These texts could rewrite our understanding of law, philosophy, and daily life in the world's first unified China. The artifacts could include not just gold and jade, but the emperor's actual chariots, his instruments of state, textiles woven with forgotten techniques, and artworks that make the terracotta army seem like a preliminary sketch. The scientific data locked in that microclimate, from pollen samples to chemical residues, could tell us about the environment, diet, and material science of an entire era with pinpoint accuracy. Opening the tomb could, in theory, provide a snapshot so complete it would be like stepping through a doorway into the year 210 before the Common Era. The temptation to open that door is the temptation of definitive answers. Yet, on the other side of the scale rests a powerful principle, the understanding that some mysteries hold their value precisely because they remain mysteries. Excavation is not a gentle act of reading, it is a disruptive intervention. Once we break the seal, the unique environment that has preserved everything for 22 centuries begins to collapse. The moment modern air, light, and humidity touch those objects, a clock starts ticking rapidly. We have learned from painful experience, like with the rapid fading of certain painted murals in other tombs, that our technology cannot always outpace decay. We might gain a shattered collection of relics where once there was a pristine tableau. The tomb as an intact, sealed entity is itself a priceless artifact, a testament to ancient ambition and belief in its complete, untouched form. By opening it, we transform it from a monument into a dataset. This tension forces us to ask what we truly seek. Is our goal to possess and categorize the objects of the past, or is it to honor the integrity of the site as it was intended? The global conversation surrounding the tomb reflects a broader shift in how we approach cultural heritage. Today, there is a growing reverence for preservation in situ, for using non-invasive technology to learn what we can while leaving the physical site undisturbed for future generations who will have tools we cannot yet conceive. This patience is a form of respect, an acknowledgement that our curiosity does not grant us an absolute right to dismantle every secret. The sealed mound, with its silent rivers of mercury, thus becomes a symbol for a new kind of relationship with history. It teaches us that sometimes the most profound act of understanding is to listen without intruding, to wonder without demanding proof, and to protect the questions themselves as part of humanity's enduring legacy. The sealed hill is now surrounded by a different kind of sentinel, one that listens without touching. Modern archaeology has embraced a quiet revolution, turning to sophisticated, non-invasive tools to study the tomb's secrets without ever breaking its seal. This is technological detective work at its most respectful, a way of interrogating the past with a whisper rather than a hammer. At the forefront is ground-penetrating radar, a device that sends pulses of energy deep into the earth and listens for the echoes. As these waves travel downward, they bounce back whenever they hit a change in density, a hidden wall, a void, or a metallic deposit. By carefully moving the equipment across the entire mound, scientists can stitch these echoes together into a ghostly, three-dimensional map of what lies below, revealing the outlines of chambers, corridors, and perhaps even the shape of those legendary rivers. It is like giving the earth an ultrasound, seeing the skeleton of the tomb through layers of soil and time. Another tool comes not from a machine, but from the heavens themselves. Researchers are experimenting with a technique called muon detection. Muons are tiny, subatomic particles created when cosmic rays from deep space collide with our atmosphere. These particles rain down upon us constantly, passing harmlessly through solid matter. However, dense materials like stone or metal will absorb more of them. By placing sensitive muon detectors around and even inside the known pits near the tomb, scientists can measure how many particles pass through the earth from different angles. A lower count in a specific direction suggests something very dense is blocking the path, like a buried bronze structure or a concentrated pool of heavy metal. This method, which peers through rock using particles from dying stars, is slowly building a shadow image of the tomb's densest features, a negative photograph developed by the universe itself. Alongside these imaging tools are advanced chemical sensors, acting as a kind of mechanical bloodhound. These devices can analyze the faintest traces of gas that seep up through microscopic fissures in the soil above the tomb. By identifying the unique chemical signatures in these vapors, researchers can infer conditions within the sealed chamber. Elevated levels of certain organic compounds might suggest preserved lacquer or silk, while the persistent mercury signature can be monitored for its source and concentration. Each scan, each measurement, from radar waves to cosmic rays to escaped molecules, adds another piece to a vast and intricate puzzle. The goal is to assemble these digital clues into a comprehensive three-dimensional model of the entire subterranean complex, a virtual tomb that we can explore without ever disturbing a single grain of earth. This patient, piece-by-piece approach allows science to satisfy our profound curiosity while honoring an even deeper commitment to preserve this unparalleled window into the ancient world for generations yet to come, who will undoubtedly have tools we cannot yet dream of. Deep within that digital map, a single point draws every line of inquiry inward, the heart of the entire complex. While the outer pits guard the army and the mercury traces hint at flowing geography, the central burial chamber remains the ultimate enigma, a locked room at the center of a 2,000-year-old labyrinth. By carefully cross-referencing the geophysical surveys with the descriptions left by Sima Qian, researchers have begun to construct a speculative, yet deeply informed, portrait of what may await in that silent space. The logical starting point is the emperor himself. Historical records and practices from the period suggest his physical remains would have been placed within a series of nested coffins, perhaps an inner casket of precious jade housed within an ornate outer shell of lacquered wood. Jade held immense spiritual significance, believed to possess properties that could preserve the physical form and protect the spirit in its journey. This practice, seen in other high-status burials of the era, would have been magnified to an imperial scale here, potentially surrounding the emperor with a veritable suit of jade plaques and ritual objects, a final armor for eternity. The chamber itself was likely designed as more than a simple room. It was a cosmic diagram, aligning with ancient Chinese beliefs that connected earthly power with celestial order. The space may have been oriented according to precise astronomical principles. The pearls inlaid in the ceiling, as described, would not have been placed randomly, but to mirror specific constellations important to the Qin dynasty's cosmology, creating a permanent, private sky for the sovereign. This celestial mapping would have been mirrored on the floor below by the layout of the Mercury rivers. Rather than arbitrary channels, their flow may have been a sacred cartography, tracing the courses of the Yellow and Yangtze rivers as they were known at the time, or even forming patterns that reflected spiritual beliefs about the underworld. The rivers were both a map of his realm and a conduit for magical energy, their shimmering paths connecting the astronomical above with the geographical below, with the emperor at the precise center of this manufactured universe. Digital artists and archaeologists working together have used this data to produce stunning visual simulations. These reconstructions show a space of almost overwhelming opulence, illuminated by the gentle, flickering light of eternal bronze lamps fueled by reservoirs of oil. The walls might have been hung with silk tapestries, now likely dissolved to dust, while lacquered cabinets could have held the emperor's personal seals, his favorite writings, and the instruments of state. The air, heavy with mercury vapor, would have glinted with the reflection of bronze and gold. These visualizations are not presented as fact, but as a profound form of scholarly storytelling. They help us comprehend the culmination of this decades-long project, a room where every element served a unified purpose. It was a masterpiece of environmental art, blending engineering with alchemy, astronomy with geography, and brutal state power with a deeply personal quest for transcendence. To stand in that chamber would have been to stand inside the first emperor's mind, a physical manifestation of his belief that he could command not just an empire, but the very structure of reality itself, even in death. The silence of the sealed tomb holds a final, chilling echo. The great historian Sima Qian concludes his account of the mausoleum's completion with a passage that has haunted readers for centuries. He writes that after the emperor's body was laid to rest, after the inner chamber was filled with treasures too precious to be described, the massive stone door was swung shut. But it was not just the door that was sealed. According to the record, the artisans and laborers who had built the intricate mechanisms and knew the precise layout of the passages were prevented from leaving. The outer gate was closed, and they were trapped inside the very labyrinth they had constructed, left to perish so the tomb's deepest secrets would die with them. This story, whether a literal recounting of events or a powerful metaphor for the project's absolute secrecy, casts a long and indelible shadow over the entire endeavor. It forces us to confront a sobering duality, the breathtaking ingenuity of the Qin dynasty standing side by side with a staggering disregard for human life. The technological marvel of mercury rivers and crossbow traps was secured by what may have been the ultimate security measure, the permanent silencing of its own creators. This dark epilogue transforms the site from a mere archaeological wonder into a monument with a profound moral weight. It reminds us that the silent clay army and the unopened hill are not just relics of art and power, but also memorials to an immense and silent cost. The brilliance of the Qin state's organization, its ability to marshal thousands for a single purpose, here reveals its most harrowing facet. The project required not just skill, but absolute control over the narrative of the tomb itself, ensuring no living soul could ever map a path back to the emperor's resting place. While modern historians debate the literal truth of this account, its symbolic power is undeniable. It encapsulates the extreme logic of a regime built on order and secrecy, where individuals were expendable components in the machinery of imperial legacy. This understanding does not diminish the awe we feel for the Terracotta army or the engineering genius the tomb represents. Instead, it adds a necessary layer of depth, a human context often lost in the grandeur. It asks us to hold two truths in our minds at once, to marvel at the achievement while acknowledging the profound hardship that made it possible. The fate of the craftsman, real or emblematic, ensures that when we look upon that quiet mound, we see not just a king's ambition, but the echo of countless unnamed lives, a permanent part of the story sealed within the earth. This deep human pattern of a river at the border of life and death echoes across the ancient world. In Greek mythology, the departed soul had to be ferried across the river Styx, a dark and sacred boundary separating the world of the living from the realm of Hades. Payment for the ferryman was essential, which is why Greeks were buried with a coin placed under their tongue. In ancient Egypt, the sun god Ra was believed to journey through the underworld each night in his solar bark, navigating a treacherous celestial river filled with symbolic challenges. Even in Mesopotamian epics, heroes like Gilgamesh crossed the waters of death in his quest for immortality. These are not coincidences but reflections of a shared archetype. Water, in its many forms, universally symbolizes transition, purification, and the impassable divide. A river is the perfect metaphor for the final journey, a flowing line one must cross from which there is no return. The first emperor's architects, whether consciously or through the cultural air they breathed, were tapping into this profound and ancient stream of thought. Their innovation was to make the metaphor breathtakingly literal. While other cultures envisioned mystical waters, the Qin dynasty used the most wondrous liquid they knew, quicksilver, to build a physical river of transition within the emperor's private afterlife. This shifts our perspective entirely. The tomb is no longer just a Chinese historical artifact. It becomes a unique entry in a global conversation about what lies beyond. The Mercury rivers are a localized answer to a universal question, rendered with the characteristic Qin blend of practicality and overwhelming scale. They took a shared human story of a final crossing and forged it in metal, creating a permanent, owned geography for their ruler's solitary passage. By seeing this connection, we understand the tomb not as an oddity of one man's ego, but as a monumental expression of a hope and a fear known to all humanity. It reveals how a culture's available materials and technological genius shape its most sacred stories, turning shared myth into a singular, silent, and shimmering reality under a mound of earth. That ancient chemical signature in the soil is more than a clue, it is a legacy. The elevated mercury levels surrounding the tomb mound create an unintended, 2,200-year-long environmental experiment, one that scientists are now reading with great care. This is not a static artifact, it is a dynamic system. Researchers continuously monitor the site, not just for archaeology, but for environmental science. They track the stability of the mercury in the soil, studying whether seasonal rains or groundwater shifts might cause this ancient contaminant to slowly migrate over time. It is a slow-motion lesson in how human activity, even when driven by ritual and belief, can etch a permanent chemical signature into the landscape. The builders of the tomb never intended to create a pollution site, yet their act of devotion has left a measurable footprint that has outlasted dynasties, languages, and empires. This creates a profound bridge between the ancient world and our own modern concerns. We live in an era acutely aware of our environmental impact, of the lasting traces our industries and cities leave behind. The tomb of the first emperor offers a startling, long-term case study. It demonstrates that the consequences of our materials and ambitions can persist in silent, subtle ways for spans of time that dwarf individual human lifespans. The mercury in that soil asks us to consider what signatures our own civilization is leaving in the earth right now, and what stories they might tell 2 millennia from now. It ties the grand quest for immortality to a very practical, enduring truth, that our actions ripple through the physical world long after our intentions are forgotten, turning monuments into messages written in the language of chemistry. The emperor's most fervent wish was also his most fatal mistake. This quest for immortality was not a quiet philosophical pursuit, but an urgent, state-sponsored operation that reveals the deep vulnerability beneath his immense power. Court records and later historical accounts tell us that Qin Shi Huang dispatched fleets of ships carrying hundreds of young men and women across the eastern seas, sending them to mythical islands like Pinglai in search of the fabled elixir of life. He hosted esteemed magicians and alchemists, granting them vast resources to concoct potions that promised to halt the aging process entirely. In the logic of the time, this made perfect sense. If an emperor could standardize weights and measures and conquer death itself, his rule would truly be without end. The tragic irony, of course, is that the most prized ingredient in these royal elixirs was often cinnabar, the beautiful red ore that yields pure mercury when heated. The very substance that symbolized permanence and cosmic power to his alchemists was, in physical reality, a slow and insidious poison. With every sip of those shimmering concoctions, the emperor was likely introducing a toxin into his own body, one that accumulates over time and can lead to neurological damage, organ failure, and a painful, erratic decline. Historical descriptions of his later years, noting bouts of paranoia and illness, align hauntingly well with the symptoms of chronic mercury poisoning. The ruler who sought to command eternity may have been unknowingly orchestrating his own premature end through the very rituals meant to prevent it. This creates a heartbreaking symmetry that transforms the tomb from a mere monument into a deeply personal story. The rivers of Mercury below ground were not just a map of his kingdom or a magical security system. They were the ultimate, solidified reflection of his lifelong obsession. The substance he consumed to live forever surrounded him in death, a final, silent embrace by the object of his desire. It underscores a universal tension in the human condition, the way our greatest hopes can sometimes weave the threads of our own undoing. For the first emperor, Mercury was the bridge between 2 impossible dreams, one for an unending life and one for an everlasting reign. In the end, the 2 dreams merged in that sealed chamber where the poison became the palace and the search for a beginning became the architecture of the end. This ancient puzzle of metal and earth has not remained locked in the past. The sealed tomb and its shimmering secrets have escaped the confines of academia to become a powerful fixture in our global imagination. You can find its echo in the pages of best-selling novels, in sweeping historical dramas, and leaping from the screen in blockbuster adventure franchises. The story possesses a unique recipe for compelling fiction, blending the high stakes of an archaeological treasure hunt with the eerie allure of a supernatural thriller and the grand scale of an emperor's lost world. These portrayals, while often taking creative liberties with the facts, serve a vital purpose. They act as a cultural engine, keeping the mystery spinning in the public consciousness and introducing each new generation to the profound wonders of ancient China. A viewer might first encounter the Terracotta army in a fantastical movie scene, only to fall down a rabbit hole of documentaries and books, arriving at the real history with a sense of personal discovery. This cycle creates a fascinating feedback loop. Popular media generates widespread curiosity and emotional investment, which in turn builds public support for the very real, careful science being done at the site. Funding for non-invasive scanning technology or for the meticulous preservation of the unearthed warriors often flows from a public captivated by the legend. The stories we tell about the tomb, even the sensational ones, remind us that this is not a dry academic subject, but a living narrative about human ambition, ingenuity, and mystery. Of course, these dramatizations also shape common perceptions of archaeology itself, often blending fact with thrilling fiction. The popular image of the archaeologist as a daring adventurer dodging booby traps owes much to tales inspired by this very tomb. While real archaeology is more about patient brushing and precise data logging than whip-cracking escapes, that romanticized vision draws people in. It creates a gateway. The key is understanding the difference between the thrilling metaphor and the meticulous reality, appreciating the story for its entertainment value while respecting the deeper, slower truth of the science. Ultimately, the tomb's journey into modern media underscores a profound point. Some historical mysteries are so potent they cease to belong solely to historians. They become shared stories, evolving with each retelling. Their core truth, the awe of what was achieved, and the enigma of what remains unseen, continuing to captivate us, proving that the first emperor's desire to dominate the narrative of eternity has, in a way he never anticipated, truly succeeded. This immense responsibility is now held within a powerful framework of international guardianship. The tomb and its terracotta army are not merely a Chinese national treasure, but a designated UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized as belonging to all of humanity. This formal status places the entire mausoleum complex under a global covenant of preservation, obligating its caretakers to protect its integrity for future generations everywhere. It transforms the site from a local archaeological wonder into a shared chapter in the story of human civilization, with the world watching over its stewardship. Domestically, Chinese cultural heritage law enforces this with the highest level of protection, strictly prohibiting any unauthorized excavation or disturbance. The site is treated with a reverence that borders on the sacred, viewed not as a resource to be mined for artifacts, but as a permanent, inviolable monument. This creates a unique and deliberate environment for research. Scientific inquiry here cannot be a solitary pursuit driven by individual curiosity. Instead, any proposed study must navigate a careful, collaborative process. Multidisciplinary panels of archaeologists, chemists, engineers, historians, and conservators must all agree on the methodology, ensuring every scan, every soil sample, every distant measurement is justified by its potential to increase understanding without causing the slightest harm. The question is never simply what can we learn, but what must we preserve. This framework forces a profound ethical balancing act, one that plays out in conference rooms and research proposals. On one side of the scale rests the immense value of historical knowledge, the potential insights into art, technology, and governance that the sealed chamber promises. On the other rests the deep respect for the site as a final resting place, a space that holds spiritual significance and commands a quiet dignity. Disturbing a burial, especially one of such profound cultural importance, is not a decision taken lightly in any society. It raises questions about the rights of the past versus the curiosity of the present. The guardians of the tomb must weigh the academic imperative against a more humanistic one, considering whether some secrets are meant to remain as the ancients intended them, as offerings to eternity rather than data points for our time. This makes the first emperor's mausoleum a living case study in global heritage management, a real-world test of our modern principles. It asks how we honor our ancestors while advancing our understanding, and how we protect a mystery without demanding it surrender all its answers. The locked door, therefore, is not just sealed by earth and poison, but by a collective, conscientious choice, a modern vow to protect a story that began over 2 millennia ago. The Sealed Hill in Shaanxi is not a solitary enigma. Across China and beyond, other monumental tombs echo its silent defiance, creating a fascinating pattern of restraint in the face of profound temptation. Consider the resting place of Emperor Jingdi of the Han Dynasty, who ruled just a few generations after the first emperor. His mausoleum complex, too, features a vast underground world with thousands of miniature ceramic figures representing his court, his army, and even his servants. While archaeologists have excavated some outer pits to reveal these astonishing scenes of daily life, the central burial mound containing the emperor himself remains untouched, a grassy hill holding its secrets close. The reasoning is a mirror of the principles at Qin Shi Huang's site, a commitment to preservation and respect that overrides the powerful urge to see what lies at the very heart. Then there is a mystery that stretches across the Mongolian steppe, the purported final resting place of Genghis Khan. According to tradition, his burial was carried out with extreme secrecy. Legend states that the funeral procession executed everyone it encountered to erase its route, and that 1,000 horses were then ridden over the site to flatten it, ensuring it would vanish into the landscape forever. For centuries, this has been the ultimate historical treasure hunt, yet modern Mongolia has declared the area a protected sacred site, legally forbidding excavation. Here, the restraint is driven by deep cultural reverence and a desire to honor the wishes of the ancestors, making the mystery itself a form of tribute. These parallel cases illuminate a crucial evolution in how we approach the past. They show that the choice surrounding the first emperor's tomb is not an isolated anomaly, but part of a growing global ethic within archaeology. The field has moved from an era of extraction to one of stewardship. The greatest discoveries are no longer measured solely by the artifacts brought into museum light, but by the wisdom to know when to leave a story undisturbed. Each unopened mound represents a conscious decision to prioritize long-term preservation, environmental safety, and ethical responsibility over the immediate thrill of revelation. This principle acknowledges that our technology, while advanced, is still imperfect, and that the act of opening can be a form of irreversible loss. It places faith in the future, believing that generations to come will develop tools and perspectives that allow them to learn from these sites without violating them. When we look at the quiet hills covering Jingdi or the vast steppe that may hold Genghis Khan, we see the same question being answered. The greatest respect we can sometimes offer history is not to unravel it, but to safeguard its integrity, allowing the silence to speak as powerfully as any artifact ever could. Its exterior form was a deliberate and powerful message. The great grassy hill we see today is not a random pile of earth. It is the visible peak of a profound architectural vision. In its original, more sharply defined state, the tomb mound was constructed as a massive earthen pyramid, with a flat, square base and sloping sides rising to a rounded summit. This geometry was not accidental. It directly embodied the most fundamental principle of ancient Chinese cosmology, the concept of a square earth sheltered beneath a domed, circular heaven. By shaping his final resting place into this form, the first emperor was physically constructing a model of the cosmos itself, a microcosm. He was placing himself at the very axis where the earthly and celestial realms met. The mound became a man-made sacred mountain, an artificial peak designed to elevate his spirit and connect his eternal rule directly to the heavenly order. This transforms our understanding of the site's scale. The story is not confined to the chambers hidden below. The architects integrated the entire landscape, from the distant mountains to the nearby river, into a single, cohesive sacred diagram. The tomb complex was oriented along precise cardinal directions, aligning with the paths of the sun and stars. The mound was the central, towering feature of this designed universe, a permanent landmark declaring that the emperor's authority was woven into the fabric of space and time. Its quiet, green slopes today are a gentle mask. They belie the roaring ambition of its creation, a statement so vast it used the very shape of the earth to make its point. This silent hill does not just cover a tomb, it completes it, serving as the eternal roof over a mirrored world, and the everlasting monument to a man who sought to become a permanent fixture in the architecture of the cosmos. That cosmic architecture came with a price tag written in human endurance. The mausoleum was the single largest construction project of its age, a continuous, 4-decade-long drain on the lifeblood of the newly unified empire. Historians estimate that at its peak, the workforce may have exceeded 700,000 individuals. This was not a volunteer corps, it was a massive conscription of laborers, artisans, and soldiers, pulled from every corner of a land still recovering from generations of war. They were the empire's human currency, spent without hesitation to build a king's forever. The logistical scale is almost incomprehensible. Feeding, housing, and organizing such a multitude in one location required its own parallel bureaucracy, a city of administration dedicated solely to the project of death. Resources were commandeered from thousands of miles away, timber from southern forests, bronze from eastern mines, stone from northern quarries, and the precious cinnabar for mercury from western mountains. Every cartload of material, every meal for a worker, represented wealth diverted from living communities and poured into a sealed hill. This was not an isolated project. It ran concurrently with other staggering endeavors, most famously the linking and expansion of the Great Wall in the north. Together, these monuments to permanence created a crushing burden. The population faced years of mandatory labor, heavy taxation to fund the projects, and the constant shadow of harsh punishment for failure to meet quotas. The Qian legal code, for all its efficiency, was famously severe, and its strictures fell heavily upon the conscripted masses. The tomb, in all its silent majesty, stands as a physical record of this immense societal strain. It is the crystallized output of an entire generation's toil, a mountain built not of stone alone, but of collective exertion. The consequence of this relentless expenditure was an empire pushed to its breaking point. The first emperor's death created a power vacuum, and the simmering resentment among the exhausted and overburdened populace soon boiled over into widespread rebellion. The mighty Qin dynasty, which had unified China through sheer force of will, collapsed into chaos just a few years after its founder was laid to rest within his perfect subterranean world. His quest for an eternal reign ironically hastened the end of his dynasty's earthly one. This offers a profound and enduring lesson, one that echoes through history. The tomb is more than an artifact, it is a case study in the limits of power. It demonstrates that even the most absolute authority cannot indefinitely command a society's entire energy toward a single, personal vision without creating fractures. The mausoleum, therefore, holds two legacies. One is the breathtaking artistic and engineering achievement we marvel at today. The other is the sobering reminder of its cost, a testament to the idea that the weight of eternity, when borne by the living, can become an anchor that drags an empire down. It asks us to consider what a society is willing to sacrifice for the vision of one person, and where the line falls between immortal legacy and unsustainable burden. Perhaps the greatest discovery will be one that never disturbs the soil. As we look toward the next century, the future of this ancient mystery lies not in excavation, but in a quiet technological revolution, one that promises to reveal the tomb's secrets while honoring its sealed silence. The guiding principle is clear: to see without touching, to map without invading. We stand on the cusp of tools that will transform our understanding from speculation into intricate, three-dimensional fact. Imagine ground-penetrating radar so advanced it can distinguish between a bronze statue and a lacquered cabinet, or muon detectors so sensitive they can trace the ghostly outline of individual mercury channels deep within the earth. These are not distant dreams, but the logical next steps in a patient, decades-long investigation. The goal is to assemble millions of data points into a coherent digital portrait, a ghost image of the chamber in astonishing detail. Beyond mere imaging, the future may bring robotic emissaries, slender, agile probes designed to navigate through any existing microscopic fissure or a carefully drilled hairline opening no wider than a straw. These machines, equipped with fiber optic cameras and environmental sensors, could act as our eyes and lungs within the space. They could sample the ancient, still air, telling us not just about toxins, but about the preserved smells of incense, wood, and pigment. They could measure humidity and temperature, critical data for understanding the preservation conditions inside. This information would be priceless, allowing conservators to plan for a distant future day if opening ever becomes ethically and technically feasible, ensuring they would know exactly how to stabilize the environment the instant it is breached. The most profound transformation, however, may be experiential. With enough high-fidelity data from scans, probes, and sensors, we could construct a perfect digital twin of the entire subterranean complex. This virtual tomb would be a masterpiece of archaeological science and digital artistry. Using virtual reality, anyone, anywhere in the world, could one day stand in the center of that buried universe. You could look up at a reconstructed pearl-studded ceiling, watch simulated Mercury flow along its designated courses, and examine hyper-realistic models of artifacts, all built from real scientific data. This would democratize discovery, making the most guarded archaeological site on Earth accessible to students, historians, and the simply curious, without a single grain of Earth being displaced. It represents a new kind of revelation where the mystery is not solved but fully illuminated, where preservation and access are no longer opposing forces. The sealed mound would remain intact, a testament to ancient ambition and modern respect, while its story is unlocked in a realm of light and data. The ultimate tribute to the first emperor's engineered eternity may be our own creation of a perfect, intangible mirror for his world, allowing it to inspire wonder for centuries more, completely on its own terms. The magnetic pull of this sealed hill is not about treasure alone, it is about the very nature of a question left hanging. Our species is wired for resolution, for the satisfying click of a puzzle piece falling into place. Yet here, for over 2 millennia, the final piece has remained stubbornly absent, buried under earth and legend. This creates a unique and powerful tension, a story perpetually stuck on its most thrilling cliffhanger. We are presented with a problem that has all the components of a perfect mystery, a locked room constructed in the distant past, complete with a detailed inventory of what might be inside and a series of deadly safeguards to keep us out. The tantalizing part is that we possess just enough information to make the unknown feel unbearably specific. We are not wondering if there is something under the mound. We are wondering if the rivers truly flow, if the pearl constellations still gleam, if the silent court of bronze officials stands in perfect array. The evidence from the soil tells us something extraordinary is there, while the ancient texts provide a map to dreams. This collision of hard science and ethereal myth is irresistible. It allows us to engage with the story on multiple levels, as historians analyzing soil samples, as engineers marveling at ancient hydraulics, and as storytellers captivated by an emperor's quest to conquer death itself. The tomb endures in our imagination precisely because it refuses to surrender to a single category. It is equally an archaeological site and a legend, a chemical anomaly and a work of art. Its power lies in its unfinished state. A mystery solved is a story that finds its place on a shelf, its energy spent. But an open question is a living thing, a space for possibility. Each generation brings its own tools and its own worldview to the edge of that mound, asking the same ancient questions with new voices. The 20th century wondered if we could open it, the 21st asks if we should, and the 22nd may develop ways to walk through it virtually without disturbing a stone. This continuous re-engagement is the tomb's true legacy. It serves as a permanent mirror for our own curiosity, reflecting back not just what we know about the Qin dynasty, but what we value about discovery itself. It teaches us that sometimes the journey of questioning, of wandering together across centuries, can be more meaningful than any single answer we might eventually find. The sealed door is a gift, a perpetual invitation to look at the vast landscape of human history and admit, with a sense of awe rather than frustration, that some wonders are so grand they were built to stay beyond our reach. That silent, unopened hill is a final communication, a message carved not in stone but in landscape and legend. What was the first emperor's ultimate statement to the ages, encoded within his sealed kingdom? One powerful interpretation is a declaration of unassailable power, a statement that his authority transcended the boundary of life itself. The tomb is not a humble resting place, it is a fortified capital for eternal governance. By surrounding himself with a complete model of his empire, staffed by an army and bureaucracy of clay and bronze, he asserted a shocking claim that the title of sovereign emperor was not an earthly office but a permanent state of being. Death was merely a relocation of the throne. This message screams defiance against time, decay, and any potential challenger, spiritual or otherwise. It is the architectural equivalent of a decree, stating his rule was so absolute it could be projected forward forever, an unbroken line of command stretching from the world of the living into the uncharted realms beyond. Yet another, more vulnerable message whispers beneath that show of strength. The tomb can also be read as a desperate, frozen plea for immortality. The man who drank mercury elixirs and sent ships to mythical islands was, in his final years, confronting the terrifying limits of his own will. When the promise of a physical elixir faded, he channeled that same desperate energy into a permanent physical solution. The rivers of mercury, sourced from the very substance of his failed potions, become a poignant symbol. They represent a shift from consuming magic to being encased within it, a final attempt to achieve through monumental artistry what he could not through alchemy alone. The entire complex is a prayer cast in bronze and earth, a hope that if he could not stop his body from changing, he could at least preserve the structure of his world and his identity within it perfectly intact. This interpretation reveals not just a tyrant, but a profoundly human figure, grappling with the same fear of oblivion that touches us all, albeit on a scale no one else could ever afford. From our modern vantage point, the tomb transmits a third, sobering message, a cautionary tale about the extremes of ambition and its human cost. The breathtaking ingenuity of the Mercury Rivers and the Terracotta army stands in stark contrast to the historical records of immense suffering. The project required the labor of hundreds of thousands, conscripted from a war-weary population, and legends speak of artisans sealed within to protect its secrets. This duality forces a difficult reflection. It asks us to consider the price of a single vision, no matter how grand. The tomb is a monument to what human genius can achieve when marshaled by absolute power, and simultaneously, a memorial to the individual lives that were the currency for that achievement. It serves as an ancient case study in the perils of hubris, showing how a drive to conquer eternity can ironically strain an empire to the point of collapse, as the Qin dynasty fell into rebellion just years after its founder was laid to rest. The sealed mound, therefore, is not just about one man's legacy, but about the societal foundations that legacy was built upon and how fragile they can become under immense weight. In its enduring silence, the tomb communicates all these messages at once. It refuses a single, simple reading. It is a declaration of power and a confession of fear, a masterpiece of engineering and a record of profound cost. This complexity is what makes the site so endlessly fascinating. It challenges us to interpret not just an archaeological puzzle, but the layered psyche of one of history's most consequential figures. We are left to listen to the echoes of his ambition, to hear both the roar of imperial command and the whisper of human limitation, forever intertwined within the quiet earth. The tomb does not give us answers, it presents us with a mirror, asking what we see when we look upon the extreme edges of human will, and what we learn about our own relationship with power, legacy, and the inevitable passage of time. The unopened chamber is a testament to the power of a question left unanswered. For more than 2,000 years, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang has stood as a silent dialogue between the ancient world and our own, a conversation conducted not with words but with soil samples, radar echoes, and the enduring pull of legend. It is a story that refuses to end, continuously inviting us to look closer while teaching us the wisdom of restraint. From the accidental discovery of a single clay face to the high-tech scans mapping its hidden geography, every step forward has revealed not a final answer, but a deeper layer of wonder. The silent terracotta army guards more than a burial mound. It guards the very idea that some chapters of history are meant to be pondered, not merely read. The Mercury's toxic signature in the earth is more than a chemical clue. It is a lasting whisper of an emperor's most profound desires and fears, a physical echo of a quest that blurred the lines between science and magic. This journey through the mystery shows us that the greatest historical puzzles are not problems to be solved, but gifts to be unwrapped slowly with care. They drive innovation, pushing us to invent new ways of seeing without touching. They teach patience, reminding us that our curiosity must be balanced with a deep respect for the past and for the silent stories it holds. They inspire awe, connecting us across centuries to the ambitions, artistry, and beliefs of those who came before. As our tools evolve, we may one day peer into that darkness with perfect clarity, constructing a virtual world from a constellation of data points. Yet even then, the true story will always be greater than any artifact or scan could convey. It lives in the space between what we know and what we wonder, in the enduring human fascination with legacy, power, and the great unknown. This sealed capsule of ancient China continues to ask us what we value more, the thrill of revelation or the profound respect of preservation. Its lasting power lies in its silence, a permanent invitation to keep questioning, keep exploring, and to marvel at the mysteries that still shape our understanding of who we are. If this exploration into one of history's greatest enigmas captivated you, there are countless more puzzles waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe to continue this journey into the past, where every discovery tells a story about our shared humanity. And we would love to hear your thoughts. What do you believe waits in the heart of that silent, grassy hill?